dear listener, to Sleepy Story Facts, where tonight's sleep story becomes a gentle bedtime story carried on the quiet tide of the universe, and where each relaxing fact is offered softly, slowly, and with a kind of calming narration meant to help you fall asleep, to loosen the weight of the day, and to let your thoughts drift outward into the grand, peaceful architecture of our cosmic neighborhood. And before we begin our nighttime story among the silent patterns of stars, nebulae, and the dim, lovely edges of gravity itself, allow yourself to settle in fully, because there is nowhere to rush to now, nowhere to solve, nowhere to prove, only this moment, this breath, this soft arrival into rest. And so, if it feels comfortable, let your body sink a little deeper into the surface beneath you. Let your jaw unclench, let your tongue rest, let your shoulders soften, as though they have just remembered they no longer need to hold up the entire day. And let your breathing become natural and unforced, like a slow tide touching a dark and quiet shore. Take one easy breath in, and as you exhale, imagine the room around you dimming into velvet stillness. Imagine that the corners of the ceiling are widening into deep space, not empty in a lonely way, but spacious in a peaceful way, full of calm distances and patient light. And with the next breath, picture yourself wrapped in a gentle bedtime hush, as though the whole universe has lowered its voice just for you, as though the stars themselves understand that this is a story for deep sleep, a sleep story woven from real cosmic truths and softened by wonder. And as you continue to rest, notice how even your heartbeat can begin to feel like part of the story, like a steady little observatory lamp glowing in the dark. Now let the mind drift with me, very slowly, toward the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood, because the space around our solar system is not random at all. And that is the first soothing fact of the night. We live inside patterns, inside a quiet arrangement of matter, motion, and time, inside a local region of the Milky Way, where stars are not thrown carelessly into darkness, but gathered into neighborhoods, associations, clouds, and flowing lanes of gas that take millions of years to change. And perhaps one of the most comforting things about the cosmos is how unhurried it is, how gracefully it refuses panic, how even its grandest changes unfold with such patience that a human lifetime is, by comparison, like a single sleepy blink. Our own sun drifts through a region often called the local interstellar cloud, a thin place of gas and dust that sounds mysterious, though it is better imagined as a faint and delicate weather system between stars so light and sparse that even the best earthly vacuum would seem crowded beside it. And yet, it is still enough to matter, enough to shape the boundary where the solar wind from our sun meets the wider galaxy, enough to create an invisible shoreline around our planetary home, a soft frontier called the heliosphere, where the influence of the sun stretches outward like a warm breath in winter air. And this too is deeply calming to consider, that our solar system is not merely sailing through nothingness, but moving inside a subtle medium, like a lantern boat crossing a dark lake with barely a ripple, while around it the galaxy hums in silence. Farther out, beyond the familiar planets and their stately orbits, lies a realm of icy bodies, the Kuiper Belt, and farther still, the imagined vastness of the Oort cloud, a distant reservoir of frozen remnants, each one moving so slowly and so far away that they seem less like objects and more like possibilities. Patient little archives from the early solar system, tucked into the cold margins of the sun's long reach. And it is lovely to remember that our cosmic neighborhood has layers, not unlike the layers of a quiet home at night. The warm lamplit room, the hallway beyond, the dark garden outside, the fence, the road, the fields, the sleeping hills. Our star belongs to a still larger arrangement too, nestled within the Orion Arm, or Orion Spur, a minor spiral arm of the Milky Way, which means that even our place in the galaxy is modest and gentle rather than dramatic, not in a crowded center, not in some violent edge, but in a comparatively calm suburb of stars where space opens generously between luminous points of light. And perhaps that is why the night sky has always invited reflection, because we are positioned in a part of the galaxy where distances are immense but not harsh, where the darkness feels spacious, not crushing. Nearby stars also form a kind of extended neighborhood, each with its own motion, each gliding along a private orbit around the galactic center, and yet together, creating a slow celestial choreography so delicate that only over enormous spans of time do the constellations truly change, which means the familiar shapes above us are temporary. Yes, but temporary on such magnificent timescales that they remain faithful companions to generation after generation. A reminder that impermanence does not have to feel abrupt, that change can be so slow it becomes a lullaby. And somewhere in the far, hushed imagination of this story, beyond the ordinary routes of planets and comets, beyond the nearby currents of gas and dust, we begin to orient ourselves toward a dormant black hole, not as a place of fear, but as a place of stillness, a sleeping well in space-time, quiet now, unlit by frenzy, resting in darkness with the deep composure of something ancient and perfectly patient. And we do not rush toward it, no, we only drift in its direction from a very great distance, as though approaching a silent mountain at night across a calm sea, aware not of danger, but of gravity's tenderness, of the way mass shapes the universe without noise, without command, simply by being. And as we move through this first chapter of our relaxing story, letting fact after fact settle like soft dust upon the mind, perhaps the greatest comfort is this: the universe has structure, and structure is a kind of kindness, because it means there are paths, boundaries, neighborhoods, gentle gradients, invisible winds, and quiet places where even the darkness belongs exactly where it is. And as you continue to rest and drift, letting these images pass slowly through your thoughts, the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood may begin to feel less like a scientific map and more like a vast and peaceful home, one in which every star keeps a respectful distance, every cloud of gas breathes in silence, every orbit unfolds with care, and every far-off mystery waits without urgency, allowing you, here and now, to release the last little knots of wakefulness and sink one breath deeper into stillness, one breath deeper into quiet, one breath deeper into sleep. Now, as this gentle bedtime story continues, let yourself drift a little farther from the familiar warmth of the sun and a little deeper into the quiet architecture of our cosmic neighborhood, because one of the most relaxing facts of all is that the darkness between stars is not truly empty, but filled with a soft and nearly invisible presence. A whisper of hydrogen atoms, traces of dust, faint magnetic fields, and the slow memory of ancient stellar winds. All of it spreads so delicately through space that it resembles not a stormy sea, but a still and endless river. And as you rest here inside this sleep story, with your breathing slow and your thoughts beginning to soften at the edges, imagine yourself gliding through that river without effort, carried by no engine and no urgency, simply moving in silence through the calm spaces that connect one star to another. The hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood reveals itself gently when we remember that stars are often born together, in clusters and families, inside giant molecular clouds, those vast and quiet nurseries of gas, where gravity patiently gathers thin material until light is born. And even after those stars drift apart over millions of years, they carry with them the memory of a shared beginning, like siblings who have wandered to distant shores, but still belong to the same old lullaby. And there is something deeply soothing in that idea, that the galaxy does not only contain isolated suns, but histories, kinships, and lingering patterns of origin written into motion itself. Our own sun likely had companions once, stars that formed from the same cloud long ago, though time has scattered them across the Milky Way. And so even here, in the apparent solitude of night, there is a hidden companionship threaded through space, a quiet reminder that separation and connection can exist together, and that distance does not erase belonging. As we move outward in this relaxing story, the local region of the galaxy begins to feel more textured, more like a softly layered landscape than a blank void, because there are bubbles in the interstellar medium, wide cavities carved by ancient supernovae, and one of these, known as the local bubble, surrounds our region with a kind of spacious hush, a low-density chamber formed over immense spans of time. And rather than imagining it as violent, you may think of it as an old cathedral of emptiness, long since cooled, spacious, and serene, where the echoes of long-ago events have already faded into stillness, leaving only shape, volume, and the tender geometry of what remains. The solar system drifts through this broad, quiet cavity while carrying its own small shield of solar wind. And this means that our home is nested within structures, inside structures, like a lantern inside a glass room, inside a great dim hall. And the more we notice these layers, the more the universe begins to feel not chaotic, but beautifully arranged, full of soft boundaries and invisible contours. Even gravity here behaves like a kind and patient storyteller, never hurrying, never raising its voice, only guiding motions over ages, bending paths slowly, persuading dust into disks, disks into worlds, and worlds into long, faithful orbits. And when you think of gravity this way, not as force, but as tenderness expressed through form, the entire cosmos becomes easier to rest inside. Somewhere ahead of us, still very far away, The dormant black hole remains a silent destination, not looming, not threatening, only waiting in perfect stillness, a dark center of calm around which space-time curves like velvet gathered in gentle folds. And we are still so distant from it that its presence is more like a thought than a sight, more like a subtle deepening in the fabric of night than an object on the horizon. And this is exactly right for a nighttime story meant to help you fall asleep. Because nothing arrives suddenly here, nothing startles, nothing breaks the rhythm of this calming narration. Instead, fact by fact, breath by breath, the journey widens, and now perhaps you can imagine the stars around us not as random points, but as lamps placed along old country roads, each one separated by gulfs of dark quiet, each one with its own planets, dust, and weather of light, each one moving through the galaxy on a path so large and slow that motion feels almost identical to rest. And that, too, is one of the most peaceful truths in astronomy. That movement can be so graceful, so immense in scale, that it becomes indistinguishable from stillness. The Orion Spur, our gentle galactic neighborhood, lies between larger spiral arms, and this gives our region a kind of in-between quality, neither crowded nor lonely. A soft lane in the Milky Way where stars have room to breathe and where the night sky from Earth can open like a patient book, its pages filled with old light arriving exactly when it can, never early, never late. And perhaps the most comforting idea of all is that light itself travels with such devotion, crossing years and centuries and ages of darkness, just to arrive quietly at a listening eye, asking for nothing, only offering its presence. So as this sleep story continues, and your body grows heavier with rest, let the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood become a cradle rather than a map, a place of layers, bubbles, star families, thin rivers of gas, and distant curvatures of gravity, all of it unfolding at a pace kind enough for dreams, all of it welcoming you not to excitement, but to deep sleep, to a slower awareness, to the feeling that the universe is vast without being harsh, mysterious without being sharp, and dark without ever being unkind. And as we drift onward through this bedtime story, still far from the sleeping black hole, and still held gently within the broad hush of our galactic suburb, you may let your thoughts loosen even more, until they are no longer thoughts at all, only soft glimmers passing through the mind like faraway stars behind a veil of cloud, quiet, patient, and almost gone. And now, as this sleep story drifts onward through the calm, unseen lanes of our galactic neighborhood, let yourself float a little deeper into stillness, because the universe, when visited slowly enough, begins to feel less like a wilderness and more like a softly ordered garden at night, full of paths you cannot quite see but can gently sense. And one of the most relaxing facts of all is that even the great Milky Way has a kind of structure beneath its glow, a hidden arrangement of lanes, currents, and quiet boundaries that guide the motion of stars, the way invisible contours guide mist through a sleeping valley. Above and around us stretches the wide disk of the galaxy, thin compared with its breadth, like a vast luminous sheet laid delicately across darkness. And within that sheet, our sun and its neighboring stars move in patient circles, each one held by gravity in an orbit so broad and so slow that the motion feels more like a long breath than a journey. And as you listen, you may imagine these stars not racing, never racing, but gliding with the hush of lanterns drifting across a black lake, each reflection long and tremulous, each path shaped by forces too gentle to make a sound. And hidden among those paths are faint rivers of stars called streams, the stretched out traces of old clusters and past encounters, long ribbons of companionship spread across the galaxy. And there is something deeply comforting in that image that stars once gathered close can leave behind soft trails of memory, not in words, not in music, but in motion itself, as if the Milky Way remembers everything quietly and without sorrow, even the dust between stars, which from far away may seem like a simple shadow, forms graceful dark lanes that fold through the galaxy like the pleats of velvet curtains. And these drifting bands of fine material have a special kindness to them, because they dim and soften the glare of distant starlight, turning brilliance into hush, brightness into lullaby. And in those cool curtains of dust, future suns are already waiting, hidden as seeds rest beneath winter soil, gathering no attention, making no demands, simply sleeping until gravity calls them patiently into light. Our own place within this gentle arrangement is still calm, still modest, still cradled in the quieter suburbs of the Milky Way. And as we move farther in imagination from the sun's familiar warmth, the dormant black hole ahead remains a soft destination in the distance, not a wound in space, not a thing to fear, but a deep well of silence where gravity has folded itself inward and now rests with immense composure. And from here, it is not seen directly at all, only felt as an idea of gathering depth, a subtle hush in the cosmic landscape, as if one part of the night had learned how to be even more still than the rest. There are magnetic fields here too, faint and far-reaching, threading through the interstellar medium like invisible silk, giving shape to gas clouds and influencing the way matter drifts and settles. And though no human eye can see those fields directly, it is soothing to imagine the galaxy gently stitched together by lines of order, by structures more delicate than cobwebs and broader than constellations, by patterns that hold without gripping and guide without haste. And then there are the galactic tides, the soft differences in gravity from place to place, subtle enough in everyday space to go unnoticed, yet grand enough over time to shape clouds, tug at distant comets, and remind every object in the cosmic neighborhood that nothing exists in complete isolation, that all things are, in some quiet manner, leaning into one another. Perhaps that is why the universe can feel so peaceful in a gentle bedtime story like this one, because its hidden structure is not rigid, but relational, not mechanical in a cold sense, but elegantly connected, as if stars, dust, gas, gravity, and time are all participating in one enormous calm conversation that began long before us and will continue long after, never rising in anger, never breaking into noise, only unfolding with patient coherence. And as your breathing slows even more, You may picture our passage now as a smooth drifting above the galactic plane, where the Milky Way below resembles a wide river of milk-pale light crossed by dusky tributaries, and somewhere beyond those soft bands, beyond nearby star systems and the sparse clouds between them, the region around the sleeping black hole grows incrementally nearer, though still so distant that its presence remains wrapped in abstraction, veiled by scale, softened by time. And this distance itself is restful, because it means we are in no hurry at all, only approaching by degrees, letting the mind acclimate to the idea of profound gravity, the way eyes slowly adjust to candlelight. So let this relaxing story hold you there for a moment, suspended in that tender middle distance where facts become atmosphere and science becomes a kind of cradle song, where star streams, magnetic threads, dark dust lanes, and the broad turning of the Milky Way gather around you, not as lessons to memorize, but as textures to rest inside. And as the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood continues to reveal itself with exquisite slowness, you may allow your thoughts to become lighter and farther apart, until they drift like dim stars through a veil of cloud, each one fading gently, each one welcomed by darkness, each one carried farther into deep sleep by the great quiet order of the night. As this gentle bedtime story continues, let your mind drift even more slowly now, as though it were wrapped in layers of soft, dark velvet. Because tonight's sleep story is not only a relaxing story about stars, but about the hidden structure that holds them in their quiet places. And one of the most soothing facts in our cosmic neighborhood is that the Milky Way is shaped less like a solid wheel and more like a vast, luminous garden path with spiral arms curving outward in long, graceful sweeps, and with our own sun resting in a smaller lane between larger ones, sheltered in a calm and spacious part of the galaxy, where light can travel for years and years before it meets another wandering sun. And as you settle deeper into this nighttime story, perhaps you can imagine the Orion Spur not as an astronomical label, but as a gentle side road in a sleeping city of stars, a softly lit passage between the brighter avenues of the Sagittarius arm and the Perseus arm, where our solar system circles the galactic center with extraordinary patience, taking hundreds of millions of years to complete a single orbit, which means that every familiar thing in human life, every season, every century, every remembered afternoon happens inside only the smallest fraction of one slow galactic turn. And there is such comfort in that scale, in the way the universe stretches time until even change becomes calm. Beneath us now, in imagination, the galactic disk lies like a great silken ribbon, thin compared with its immense width, and the stars within it do not move all together at the same pace, but drift according to their distance from the center, creating a subtle shearing motion over ages so long they feel almost like stillness itself. And yet, from this difference in motion comes pattern. From pattern comes spiral structure, and from spiral structure comes one of the loveliest truths of all, that beauty in the universe often emerges not from rigidity, but from flow, not from things standing frozen, but from countless motions, balancing one another with elegant restraint. Some stars rise slightly above the galactic plane, and some dip below it, gently bobbing as they orbit, like tiny lanterns afloat on the breath of an unseen tide. And our own sun does this too, moving up and down through the disk over immense spans of time. So even our cosmic home has a slow vertical rhythm, a barely perceptible swaying in the dark. And perhaps, as you listen, your own breathing can begin to mirror that motion, a quiet rising and falling, a soft passage through layers of rest. And all around this bright disk, there extends something even more hidden, something never seen directly, and yet deeply important to the shape of our neighborhood. A vast halo of dark matter, an invisible structure whose gravity helps hold the galaxy together. And although its name may sound mysterious, you need not imagine anything sharp or alarming. Only a great unseen embrace, a broad and silent framework surrounding the Milky Way, giving it balance, giving it depth, giving the visible stars a larger home than light alone can reveal. And there is something deeply peaceful in knowing that what we see is not all there is, that the night is supported by gentle hidden architecture, by presences felt through their steadiness rather than their brightness. As this calming narration carries you onward, the dormant black hole that waits far ahead remains folded into the story like the darkest stitch in a long piece of velvet, subtle, central, and still very far away. And from here, its influence is less a destination than a deepening of perspective, a reminder that even the most powerful structures in the galaxy can rest in silence, and that gravity at every scale is simply the art of shape, the art of making paths curve, of drawing matter inward, of teaching light and dust and stars how to move together without ever needing a sound. Perhaps now you can picture the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood as a series of nested forms, the local interstellar cloud around our sun, the heliosphere within it, the Orion spur around us, the great disk of the Milky Way beyond that, and then the invisible halo surrounding all of it, each layer holding the next, each one quieter and larger than the last, like rooms within rooms inside a vast sleeping house. And in that house, nothing is hurried, nothing is truly lost, because even drifting gas may someday become a star. Even scattered stars may leave streams. Even darkness may be full of form. And as this bedtime story grows softer, you may let those forms blur at the edges, not into confusion, but into peace, because you do not need to map them or memorize them tonight. You only need to feel their gentleness, to rest in the knowledge that the universe is full of hidden support, invisible curves, slow orbits, broad halos, and quiet patterns that continue whether or not anyone is watching. And somewhere ahead, still distant and dormant, the black hole waits within that same order, not as an interruption of peace, but as one more expression of it, a place where space has folded inward and become profoundly still. And so, we continue toward it without effort, floating through spiral geometry, through the soft mechanics of the Milky Way, through a darkness that is never empty and never cold in spirit, only deep, spacious, and kind. And with each passing breath, you may drift farther from waking thought, farther from the bright edges of the day, and deeper into the soothing structure of the night, where the galaxy turns almost imperceptibly around you, and sleep arrives the way starlight arrives, quietly, faithfully, and exactly when it is ready. And now, as this sleep story carries you farther into the soft architecture of our cosmic neighborhood, let the mind become even lighter, even slower, because one of the gentlest truths in astronomy is that the farthest edges of a system are often the most peaceful, the most patient, and the least inclined to hurry. And so tonight's bedtime story drifts outward for a little while toward the dim and almost dreamlike frontier, where the sun's familiar influence grows thin and the outer dark begins to feel vast, cool, and beautifully arranged. Here, beyond the bright parade of the major planets, and beyond the small glittering traces of ordinary memory, lie regions where ancient icy bodies move with extraordinary calm, tracing long and delicate paths through cold space. And these distant objects, whether gathered in the Kuiper Belt or imagined in the enormous round hush of the Oort cloud, offer one of the most relaxing facts of all, which is that our solar neighborhood does not end sharply like a wall, but fades gently into wider and wider circles of possibility, like lamplight diminishing across a quiet floor at night. And as your breathing settles into an even softer rhythm, you may picture those icy bodies not as rocks or fragments, but as sleeping seeds of the early solar system, tiny archives of an older age preserved in darkness so complete and so still that time itself seems to stretch out beside them and rest. And this is part of the hidden structure we so rarely feel in daily life, that our cosmic home has long outer shelves, deep storage rooms of frozen memory, silent reservoirs that hold the leftovers of creation with no need to announce themselves. Sometimes, over immense spans of time, a small gravitational nudge from a passing star, or the broad, slow pull of the galaxy itself, can alter one of these distant paths. And yet, even that is not a disruption so much as a whisper, a subtle invitation for motion to change by degrees. And perhaps that is why this relaxing story can feel so soothing, because even in the far outer dark, change usually arrives with exquisite gentleness, not as a crash, but as a curve, not as a command, but as a lean. The galaxy exerts these soft tidal influences across great distances, shaping the most remote members of the sun's extended family with patience beyond anything human. And it is lovely to remember that even at the edges, where sunlight is faint and warmth almost entirely gone, objects are still held within relationships, still touched by the wider Milky Way, still included in a grand pattern of belonging. And somewhere ahead, still very far ahead, the dormant black hole remains our silent point of orientation, a deep stillness nested within deeper stillness, not yet visible, not yet near, only sensed as the serene center of a larger gravitational poem. And from where we drift now, among the long, cold margins of the solar domain, that distant darkness seems less like an object and more like a final hush waiting at the end of a long corridor, where all motion becomes very measured and every thought can soften into quiet, Even the boundary between the heliosphere and interstellar space may be imagined here as a kind of tender shoreline, not marked by foam or sound, but by changing influence, by the place where the sun's outflow yields gradually to the broader medium between stars. And that idea that even invisible domains have coastlines makes the universe feel strangely intimate, as though every vastness has an edge where one calm region greets another. Perhaps this is why a nighttime story about cosmic structure can help you fall asleep so easily. Because the universe, when listened to slowly, is full of thresholds rather than cliffs, gradients rather than shocks, and patient transitions rather than endings. And each transition invites the body to unclench a little more, to let the mind release one more bright little thought, and place it gently on the dark water to drift away. Now the stars behind us feel softer, more widely spaced, and the familiar center of the solar system seems less like a fixed home and more like a distant hearth, glowing quietly behind many curtains of cold, while around us, the hidden architecture of the outer neighborhood becomes beautifully simple. Long orbits, faint tides, sparse light, frozen memory, and the broad companionship of gravity, extending farther than sight, farther than easy comprehension, yet never beyond comfort. And if you imagine yourself here, floating peacefully at the threshold between the sun's protective breath and the larger breathing of the galaxy, you may notice how restful that meeting feels, how natural it is for one sphere of calm to give way to another, and how deeply reassuring it can be to know that the cosmos is not merely a collection of objects, but a layered arrangement of influences, each one dissolving gradually into the next, each one making room for stillness. So let this gentle bedtime continue in exactly that spirit, with no urgency at all, as we remain suspended near the quiet outer margins of the solar realm, listening to the almost inaudible tides of the Milky Way, sensing the far-off presence of the sleeping black hole ahead, and allowing the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood to cradle you with its patient design, until the distances become soft, the cold becomes comforting, the dark becomes velvety, and your thoughts, like distant comets turning slowly through ancient shadow, begin to fade so far into silence that they no longer feel like thoughts at all, only calm motions in a beautifully ordered night, carrying you farther and farther toward deep sleep. Now, as this gentle bedtime story continues its unhurried drift through the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood, let yourself feel how peaceful it is to move among the nearby stars, because one of the most relaxing facts in all of astronomy is that even the stars closest to our sun are not crowded together in any harsh or hurried way, but spaced across immense, velvety distances, each one resting in its own wide chamber of darkness, like softly glowing windows in a sleeping countryside. And as this sleep story carries you farther from the bright edges of waking thought, you may imagine our local region not as a busy city of light, but as a quiet village scattered across a deep and tender night, where every lamp is separated by meadows of shadow so broad and calm that silence itself seems to have room to breathe. The nearest stars, though close by cosmic standards, are still separated from us by such extraordinary stretches of space that their light spends years crossing the distance. And there is something deeply soothing in that patience, in the idea that even nearness in the universe is measured gently, without haste, without noise, without demand, as though the cosmos prefers long pauses and soft arrivals over anything abrupt. And among these nearby suns are different kinds of stars, some small and red and slow burning, some brighter and warmer, some gathered in pairs that circle one another with serene devotion. And perhaps that is another hidden comfort of our neighborhood. That companionship appears even here in the dark, with twin stars turning together in gravitational trust, never colliding in anger, never breaking the hush, only orbiting with such long and faithful rhythm that their movement becomes another form of stillness. Our own sun, for all its warmth and life-giving light, is only one quiet member of this local arrangement, one lantern among many. And as we drift in imagination beyond its familiar glow, the neighborhood around it begins to reveal a delicate order, not a strict grid, not a rigid map, but a loose and graceful spacing shaped by old histories of star birth, galactic motion, and the subtle contours of gravity. Some stars belong to moving groups, sharing a common origin and gliding through the galaxy with echoes of the same direction, as if they still remember the cloud from which they once emerged. And there is such peace in that notion that even after millions of years of separation, a kind of family resemblance remains in their motion, a soft continuity written not in faces, but in flight. As this relaxing story deepens, imagine these neighboring stars suspended around you like warm beads on invisible threads, each one carrying planets, dust, magnetic weather, and long histories of its own, yet each also participating in the larger hush of the Milky Way. All of them together forming the local texture of the Orion Spur, that calm side lane of the galaxy, through which our sun has been quietly traveling for ages, beyond ordinary comprehension. And still, beyond this scattered gathering of nearby suns, the dormant black hole remains the silent destination of our story, far away, and folded into darkness with immense composure. And from here, it is not a sight, but a direction, not an event, but a stillness, the deepest note in a lullaby too vast to hear all at once. And as we continue to drift toward it by the smallest imaginative degrees, the journey remains gentle, because the universe never asks us to arrive quickly, only to notice slowly. Perhaps you can feel now how the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood is built not only from clouds, dust lanes, and spiral arms, but also from spacing itself, from the beautiful fact that emptiness can be part of an arrangement. That distance can be a kind of architecture, that the wide dark between stars is not a failure of design, but one of its loveliest features, giving every sun room to shine softly and every orbit room to unfold. This is one of the great calming truths for deep sleep, that the cosmos is not tightly packed or pressing inward, but open, measured, breathable, and tenderly proportioned. And so your mind may begin to mirror that openness now, loosening its crowded corners, widening its inner rooms, allowing one thought to drift away from the next, until there is quiet space between them, nearby stellar neighborhoods also change over time, but so slowly that change becomes part of the piece, with stars gliding past one another over hundreds of thousands and millions of years, subtly redrawing the sky with a patience beyond any earthly clock. And in that grand slowness, there is reassurance, because nothing in this story needs to be resolved tonight. Nothing needs to rush toward a conclusion. Not the stars, not the journey, not even the approach to the sleeping black hole, which still waits in perfect silence beyond the local region, serene and undisturbed. So rest here a little longer among the neighboring suns, in this calm arrangement of scattered lights and immense velvety intervals, and let this bedtime story hold you in its soft geometry, where every star is a quiet fact, every distance a cushion of dark, every orbit a form of trust, and every slow movement through the galaxy a reminder that the universe knows how to be gentle. And as these nearby lights grow softer in the mind and the spaces between them become smoother and wider, you may feel yourself drifting farther into calm, farther into the deep hush between thoughts, farther into that soothing and wordless place where the night no longer feels like an absence at all, but like a vast, beautifully arranged neighborhood carrying you with infinite patience towards sleep, as this gentle bedtime story continues its quiet passage through the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood. Let yourself drift a little deeper into the softer regions of the galaxy now, because one of the most relaxing facts in astronomy is that many stars begin not in brightness, but in dimness, inside great cool clouds of gas and dust that spend ages simply resting in the dark. And tonight, in this sleep story meant to help you fall asleep, we move toward those tender places where the Milky Way keeps its future sunlight folded away like a secret blanket in a cedar chest. Calm, fragrant with mystery, and never in a hurry to open, these clouds, sometimes called molecular clouds, are among the quietest structures in our galactic neighborhood, wide and cold, and so diffuse that even when they stretch across light years of space, they remain more like a deep mist than a wall, more like breath on winter air than anything solid. And yet inside them, with extraordinary patience, gravity begins its slow and careful gathering, drawing the thinnest material inward, until pockets of gas grow denser, rounder, stiller, and eventually warm enough to begin the long journey towards starlight. And there is something profoundly soothing in that process, because it reminds us that in the universe, becoming bright often begins by becoming quiet, that light is born out of stillness, and that even a star may first spend ages hidden in shadow before it ever learns to glow as your breathing slows further. And this bedtime story wraps around your thoughts like a soft blanket. You may imagine these dark clouds floating ahead like enormous sleeping islands, with edges so feathery and gentle they seem to dissolve into the surrounding night, their interiors layered with dust fine as powder and gas thin as a whisper. And all through those interiors, tiny movements unfold so slowly that they feel almost indistinguishable from rest, which is why they belong so naturally inside a relaxing story, because nothing about them insists, nothing startles, nothing rushes forward with noise. Instead, they wait, and waiting in the cosmos is often a sacred art. Some of these clouds are shaped by old stellar winds, some by the wide tides of the galaxy, some by ancient events so distant in time that their energy has long since faded into structure alone, leaving behind arches, ridges, folds, and cavities. And when we look at this hidden architecture gently, it begins to feel like the inner drapery of the Milky Way, a series of soft rooms and layered corridors where matter rests before taking on its next form. Our own sun was once part of such a place, born from a cloud that gathered itself in silence long before Earth had oceans, long before mountains, long before any sleeping listener could imagine the stars. And that means the warmth we know from our daylight began in one of these cool, dark nurseries, which is a beautifully calming thought that even the familiar gold of morning once belonged to shadow and stillness. And as we drift among these sleeping clouds, the dormant black hole ahead remains very far away, held in the distance like a deeper chamber of the same great house, another form of cosmic quiet waiting beyond these softer rooms. And from here, its presence seems almost ceremonial, a reminder that the galaxy contains many kinds of silence: the fertile hush of a molecular cloud, the open hush between neighboring stars, the structural hush of spiral arms, and, farther on, the profound gravitational hush of a black hole at rest. Perhaps that is why the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood can feel so comforting, because it is not built only from things that shine, but from things that shelter shining, from the dim frameworks that make brightness possible, from the soft darkness that allows the universe to prepare itself. Even the dust inside these clouds has a tenderness to it, tiny grains of carbon and silicates drifting through cold space, dimming the light behind them and helping warmth gather in protected pockets. And though such particles are unimaginably small, together they shape whole regions of the galaxy, proving that gentleness repeated enough times can become architecture. And perhaps your own thoughts can follow that pattern now, growing smaller and softer, less like bright declarations, and more like drifting grains settling quietly through a beam of late-night light, until the mind itself begins to feel cloud-like, spacious, cool, and at peace. In this nighttime story, there is no need to witness the hurried birth of anything, because we remain in the long before, in the sacred pause, in the era of gathering rather than arrival. And that makes this part of the journey especially kind for deep sleep, because the universe here is not performing, not dazzling, only preparing, only breathing in slow, invisible measures, while its future stars dream themselves into being. So rest here a little while longer among these dark and tender nurseries of the Milky Way, where gravity works like a lullaby, where dust softens every distant gleam, where hidden folds of gas cradle unborn suns, and where our own drifting path continues without effort, still angled toward the far-off stillness of the sleeping black hole, yet content for now to linger in this softer chamber of the galaxy, letting every thought become quieter, every image dimmer, every breath slower, until the dark itself feels warm and held, and the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood becomes not a map to follow, but a cradle in which your waking mind can finally loosen, settle, and sink into sleep. Welcome deeper into this continuing sleep story, shaped in the calm, long-form rhythm you've been building toward night after night. As this gentle bedtime story moves onward through the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood, let yourself drift now into one of the quietest ideas the galaxy offers, which is that not everything in space belongs neatly to the bright lanes of spiral arms or the warm company of nearby suns. Because beyond the familiar lights and dust-softened roads of the Milky Way, there are older wanderers, lonelier lights, quiet globes of stars, and dim companions circling far from the center in a region so broad and delicate that it feels less like a boundary and more like a sigh. And tonight, in this relaxing story meant to help you fall asleep, we enter that hush with no urgency at all, only a slow and floating attention, as though we were being carried in silence above a sleeping sea. The galaxy, for all its graceful spiral structure, is not only a disk, but also a halo, an immense surrounding region where globular clusters drift like ancient lantern bundles, each one holding hundreds of thousands of stars, so tightly gathered that from afar they seem like pearls sewn into the outer dark. And yet, even these clusters, though dense within themselves, are scattered across such tremendous distances that the larger halo remains spacious, thin, and serene. A place where time feels even more stretched, even more patient, even less interested in the little clocks of waking life. And there is something profoundly soothing in the thought that some parts of our cosmic neighborhood are older than almost everything we know, that these globular clusters have been circling the galaxy through age after age, watching spiral arms turn, stars form, stars fade, clouds gather and disperse, all while keeping their own slow orbits in the outer hush, like elderly choirs moving through a moonless garden with their candles cupped against an invisible breeze. Perhaps, as your breathing grows quieter, you can imagine those halo clusters not as crowded cities of stars, but as softly glowing orchards suspended in darkness, each one self-contained, each one ancient, each one turning through the larger gravity of the Milky Way with such patience that motion becomes indistinguishable from rest. And this, too, is one of the most relaxing facts in astronomy, that enormous systems can remain beautifully bound for billions of years without strain, without sound, without needing to announce the effort that holds them together. Farther out still, the halo is thought to include faint streams, remnants of small galaxies long ago folded gently into the Milky Way, their stars stretched into delicate ribbons by gravity's quiet persistence. And it is comforting to imagine that even great encounters in the universe may leave behind forms of grace, not wreckage alone, but long, soft trails of belonging. As though the galaxy, when it welcomes smaller companions, remembers them, as music remembers a note after it has faded. All around us in this nighttime story, the visible and the hidden continue to nest together. Spiral arms within the disk, dark matter around the hole, star streams in the halo, globular clusters turning at the edge, each layer adding depth without noise. And somewhere still ahead of us, still far ahead, The dormant black hole remains the silent destination of our tale, more central now in feeling than before, though still distant enough to be held gently in the imagination, like a darker fold in velvet glimpsed from the corner of a candlelit room. And because we are still approaching slowly, very slowly, there is no sharpness to that thought, only a deepening calm, a sense that gravity itself is becoming more noticeable as structure, not as force to fear, but as a patient sculptor, shaping paths, binding clusters, drawing stars into lanes and lanes, into galaxies and galaxies, into long-lived forms that endure by quiet relation. In this outer region, the night feels even wider, because the familiar clutter of local stars has thinned, leaving broad intervals of darkness between the halo's scattered treasures. And emptiness here is not barren, but restful, a great cushion of space in which every light has room to breathe, every orbit has room to unfold, and every ancient cluster can move in its own measured arc without interruption. Perhaps your own thoughts can begin to mirror that spacing now, becoming fewer, farther apart, less insistent, each one dimming into the next with the softness of distant starlight behind a veil of mist. And as they do, the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood may feel less like a scientific arrangement and more like a grand sleeping house where the inner rooms are warm with stars. The outer halls are lined with old lanterns, and beyond them, all the quiet architecture continues into stillness too deep to fully name. So remain here for a while in the halo's gentle breadth, among ancient clusters, faint stellar streams, and the broad invisible embrace that holds the galaxy together. And let this sleep story wrap that outer darkness around you like a cool silk blanket, because nothing here is hurried, nothing presses near, nothing asks anything of you except that you drift and drift and drift a little farther from the bright surface of thought, while the Milky Way turns below in its soft, luminous wheel. The halo keeps its old and silent watch, and the dormant black hole ahead waits in perfect composure, not calling you forward, but allowing you to arrive by degrees, by breaths, by the slow surrender of wakefulness, until the whole hidden neighborhood feels like one vast cradle of motionless motion, and you, held within it, become quieter than speech, lighter than memory, and almost ready to disappear into deep sleep. And now, as this gentle bedtime story continues its slow and dreamlike passage through the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood, let yourself drift inward by the smallest imaginable degree, because after the spacious hush of the halo and the old lantern clusters that circle the Milky Way in their patient silence, there comes another kind of stillness, a deeper and more gathered calm, the kind that lives closer to the galaxy's center, where starlight grows denser, distances fold into richer layers, and yet the great scale of everything remains so immense that even fullness can feel tranquil, like a city seen from a distant hill at midnight, all its lights softened by mist, all its movement too slow and far away to disturb your rest. As this sleep story carries you onward, imagine the outer halo gradually receding behind you, not vanishing, but dimming into a soft ring of memory, while ahead the broad body of the Milky Way seems to gather itself with graceful composure, and the hidden architecture of the galaxy begins to feel more intimate, more rounded, more like a vast sleeping house in whose deeper rooms the walls are lined with ancient stars, warm dust, and slow-turning paths that have known gravity for ages beyond counting. One of the most relaxing facts of all is that the closer one comes to the galactic center, the more the universe reveals its habit of layering, because there are stars upon stars, lanes of dust threaded between them, invisible structures shaping their motion, and a quiet bulge of ancient suns swelling gently from the flat disk. All of it arranged not with sharp edges, but with soft transitions, like folds in fabric, like hills beneath snow, like candlelight deepening from one room into the next. And perhaps that is why this part of the journey feels so restful, because nothing here arrives suddenly. Nothing breaks the mood of deep sleep. Instead, the galaxy simply becomes richer around you, the way a lullaby becomes fuller when lower notes join beneath the melody. And as your breathing slows, you may feel that same richness entering your thoughts, not as stimulation, but as softness, as if each new image were being wrapped in velvet before it reaches your mind. Round the galactic bulge, stars move in long and graceful patterns, some tracing loops, some passing through elongated paths, all of them held within a deep field of belonging. And there is something profoundly comforting in that, in the idea that even where the galaxy is fullest, the motion remains patient, measured, and obedient to quiet laws that never need to raise their voice. This is the secret kindness of gravity, that it creates complexity without commotion. And so even here, nearer the central regions, the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood remains calm enough to cradle the imagination rather than excite it. Now the dormant black hole ahead, still central to our story and still approached with utmost gentleness, begins to feel a little less like an abstract far-off thought and a little more like a silent chamber toward which the whole architecture has been leaning all along, not in alarm, not in urgency, but in deep composure, because the heart of a galaxy need not be imagined as violent when tonight we are visiting it in rest, in stillness, in the hushed mood of a nighttime story designed to help you fall asleep. From here, its presence is like a low note felt more than heard, a gravity of peace, a central hush so deep that the stars nearby seem to arrange themselves around it with an almost ceremonial calm, each one turning through its ancient route as if participating in a dance too slow for daylight to notice. And still we do not hurry, because hurrying would break the spell of this relaxing story, and the universe, in its wiser hours, never hurries at all. It only gathers, deepens, widens, and waits. Perhaps you can picture the galactic center now not as a point, but as a twilight garden of crowded starlight, where golden glows overlap behind long veils of dust, where every beam is softened before it reaches us, and where hidden structures rest beneath the visible ones, the way roots rest beneath soil, supporting the beauty above without asking to be seen. In this image, there is nothing harsh, nothing dramatic, only layers of old warmth folded into darkness. And somewhere within those folds, the sleeping black hole remains what it has always been in our story, a place of profound stillness, a quiet well in space-time dormant, patient, and wrapped in the same cosmic hush that has carried us from the edges of our solar neighborhood to this deeper interior of the Milky Way. And as we drift closer in spirit, if not yet very close in distance, the whole galaxy seems to breathe around you, slow and silent, its spiral arms behind, its halo beyond, its central bulge ahead, and every part of it joined by invisible curves, by patient motions, by a structure so grand and so tender that even the darkest center can feel like a place of rest. So let yourself remain here, floating in the soft threshold before the galactic heart, where the stars are many but never noisy, where dust dims every brightness into calm, where gravity gathers everything into quiet relation, and where your own thoughts can begin to gather too, not into effort, but into stillness, into a heavier and more peaceful kind of silence, until the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood no longer feels distant or abstract at all, but close and sheltering, like a roof of stars above a sleeping room. And as that feeling deepens, the last bright fragments of the day may soften, blur, and drift away, leaving only the serene inward pull of darkness, the low cradle song of the galaxy's quiet heart, and the gentle approach of sleep. And now, as this gentle bedtime story continues its slow descent into the quieter heart of our galactic neighborhood, let yourself drift even more softly, because we have come to a region where the hidden structure of the cosmos feels both deeper and more intimate, a place where stars move in graceful devotion around a darkness so calm, so ancient, and so still that it seems less like an interruption in space and more like the most patient room in an immeasurably large house. And tonight, in this sleep story designed to help you fall asleep, we do not rush toward that room. We do not hurry to name it too sharply. We only float near its influence and notice how everything around it becomes ordered in a gentler and more profound way. One of the most relaxing facts in all of astronomy is that even near a black hole, there can be long eras of quiet, long stretches in which nothing dramatic occurs at all. Only stars tracing their ancient paths, dust resting in dim folds, and gravity shaping motion with a silence so complete that it feels almost like kindness. And this is the mood we enter now, not the mood of danger, not the mood of speed, but the mood of patient orbits, of deep time, of a central stillness around which the galaxy has arranged part of its hidden life. Imagine the black hole ahead not as a jagged void, but as a sleeping well in space-time, a place where mass has gathered so fully that the fabric of the cosmos curves inward with perfect composure. And around that inward curve, stars pass in long ellipses and soft arcs, each one keeping to its path with an elegance that seems almost ceremonial, as though the whole inner neighborhood were participating in a dance too slow to hear and too beautiful to disturb. And as you rest here, perhaps feeling your own breath becoming slower, deeper, and more spacious, you may picture those stars as warm lanterns moving around an unseen center, each one carrying its own age, its own light, its own quiet history, and yet all of them surrendering gently to the same invisible shape in the night, which is another comforting truth, that the universe often creates beauty by allowing many separate things to be guided by one hidden source of order. There are clouds here too, dim curtains, and soft streams of material lingering in the inner galaxy. And though some regions may at times grow active, tonight we remain in the dormant hush, in the restful interval, in the serene chapter where the black hole is quiet, and the surrounding stars are the true music of the scene, moving with such patience that their orbits feel more like breathing than traveling, more like the rise and fall of sleep than the mechanics of celestial motion. Perhaps that is why this part of the bedtime story can feel especially soothing, because the deeper we go into the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood, the more the universe reveals that even its most mysterious places are made not only of extremes, but of rhythm, spacing, repetition, and calm. And if you listen inwardly, those patterns may begin to resemble the soft regularity of your own resting body, your heartbeat finding its quieter tempo, your thoughts passing in wider intervals, your awareness becoming less bright and more velvety around the edges. The black hole remains unseen in any ordinary sense, wrapped in darkness and known by what it allows around it, by the motion it shapes, by the stillness it deepens. And there is something profoundly gentle in that idea that some of the most important structures in the cosmos do not shine at all, but reveal themselves by the quiet harmony they create in nearby things, as though the universe itself understands that what is central need not always be loud. And now, as this relaxing story settles around you like a warm blanket laid over cool evening air, imagine yourself suspended at a respectful distance from that dormant center, far enough to feel no tension, only wonder, only softness, only the low and steady comfort of knowing that gravity here has become architecture, pure hidden structure, a shaping presence that gathers stars into elegant motion and leaves the rest wrapped in shadow. And in that shadow, nothing feels empty, because every darkness here is full of relation, full of waiting, full of time made slow and spacious enough for dreams. Perhaps the galaxy's quiet heart can be felt now as a cradle within a cradle. The solar system, once held within interstellar clouds, those clouds within a spiral arm, that arm within the Milky Way, and now the Milky Way itself, leaning inward toward this deeper fold of peace, where even the oldest motions continue without noise, without friction, without complaint, and where the night seems to thicken not into fear, but into softness. So stay here a little longer, drifting among the velvet orbits around this sleeping darkness, letting every fact dissolve into atmosphere, every scientific truth become a cushion of calm, every star a slow candle circling an invisible center of rest, until the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood no longer feels like something distant above you, but something vast and sheltering around you. And as that feeling deepens, the mind may release its final small efforts, its final bright edges, its final need to follow every thought, and instead simply float, gently and wordlessly, in the profound hush near the galaxy's quiet center, where the black hole sleeps, the stars keep watch, and you drift farther down into deep sleep. As this gentle bedtime story continues, let yourself drift even more slowly now, because In the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood, there are moments when nearness does not feel intense at all, but strangely tender, and this is one of those moments. A quiet approach into the deeper, inward hush of the galaxy, where the dormant black hole remains at rest, and the stars around it move like soft lanterns carried through a silent evening procession, each one following its long path without hurry, without noise, without ever disturbing the velvety calm that has wrapped this sleep story from the beginning. And as you listen, perhaps with your body growing heavier and your thoughts growing lighter, you may imagine yourself floating at a serene observational distance from the sleeping center, far enough to feel only wonder, only the softness of great scales, only the subtle truth that even here, in one of the most mysterious regions of the Milky Way, the dominant feeling can still be peace. One of the most relaxing facts of all is that stars near a galactic center may spend years, decades, and far longer tracing their graceful orbits around the unseen mass. Each path a kind of patient sentence written in gravity, each loop and curve revealing not violence, but order. And tonight, in this calming narration meant to help you fall asleep, we rest not in the mathematics of those paths, but in their gentleness, in the way they suggest that the universe keeps its deepest secrets not with chaos, but with rhythm. Around us now, the inner galaxy seems less like a crowded place and more like a dim cathedral of layered light, with countless old stars glowing through folds of dust, their brightness softened as though wrapped in gauze, and every beam arriving only after a long and devoted journey through the dark, so that even illumination here feels sleepy, filtered, and kind. And perhaps that is why this part of the bedtime story settles so easily over the mind, because the black hole itself does not need to be seen directly to shape the atmosphere. It is enough to feel the way the surrounding stars lean into its presence, enough to notice how the whole region seems arranged around a silence deeper than ordinary silence, a stillness that does not erase the nearby lights, but teaches them to move with greater grace. If you imagine the center now, not as a hard point, but as a deep velvet well, then the stars around it become almost like leaves floating around a dark pool in autumn twilight, each one carried by currents too calm to ripple the surface, each one making its passage with such patient inevitability that the mind, listening closely, begins to imitate that pace, slowing its own circling, softening its own need to land anywhere quickly. This is one of the quiet gifts of cosmic structure, that the larger and more ancient it becomes, the more it invites surrender, the more it teaches that motion and rest are not opposites at all, but companions, because a star can move for ages and still embody stillness, and a black hole can hold immense gravity and still feel like the most restful chamber in the night. All around this resting core, there are invisible boundaries and subtle gradations, regions where starlight thickens, where dust gathers in cooler folds, where the background hush of the galaxy deepens into something almost ceremonial. And we drift through these layers, as though moving through darker and softer rooms in a vast sleeping house. Each threshold entered without effort, each chamber quieter than the last. Perhaps your own thoughts can begin to do the same now, passing from the brighter room of wakefulness into the dimmer room of drowsiness, then into the softer room beyond that, where words lose their edges and images no longer arrive sharply, but dissolve into one another like faint light through mist. The dormant black hole remains central and still, and the stars nearest it continue their elegant circling. But nothing here feels urgent, because urgency belongs to daylight and tasks and clocks, while this nighttime story belongs to slow scales, deep time, and the soothing truth that the universe is often most beautiful when it is quietest. Even gravity, here in the heart of the galaxy, feels less like pulling and more like listening, as though space itself were leaning inward to hear an ancient lullaby. And every nearby star, every dim veil of dust, every measured orbit were part of that same song, repeating its calm refrain again and again across centuries too large for the waking mind to hold. And now, as you continue floating in this serene inner region, it may become easier to let the facts themselves blur into atmosphere, easier to stop following each image with deliberate attention, and instead simply rest inside them, inside the dark pool of the central well, inside the circling lantern stars, inside the layered dust and the softened glow, and the quiet architecture of invisible forces shaping everything without ever raising their voice. So remain here for a little while longer, nestled in the hush around the galaxy's sleeping center, where the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood feels at its most intimate and most immense at once. And let the scene grow dimmer, slower, and more distant with each breath, until the stars seem to circle farther away. The central darkness becomes only a soft fold in the night, and your own thoughts, like those patient inner orbits, continue gently for a moment, and then become so wide, so quiet, and so unhurried that they fade almost completely into the deep and peaceful dark of sleep. And now, as this gentle bedtime story continues deeper into the restful heart of our cosmic neighborhood, let yourself drift even more softly, because there comes a point in every relaxing story where the journey no longer feels like travel at all, but like floating inside a calm understanding. And that is where we have arrived tonight, in a region where the hidden structure of the galaxy seems to breathe in long and peaceful intervals, and where even time itself begins to feel smoother, slower, and more velvety around the edges. Here, near the dormant black hole that has quietly guided our nighttime story from afar, the greatest comfort may be this: that gravity does not always need to be imagined as force, but can instead be felt as shape, as a deep and silent curve in reality, a gentle bending of paths, a restful invitation for stars, dust, and light to move in elegant relation. And if you let that thought settle, perhaps the whole scene becomes easier to rest inside, because it is not a place of noise or alarm, only a place where the universe has folded inward and become profoundly still. Around us, the stars continue their patient circling, each one like a small warm lantern gliding through an ancient hall, and their motion is so steady, so unhurried, that it begins to resemble the steady drift of your own breathing, the way an inhale arrives without being summoned, the way an exhale departs without resistance. And one of the most relaxing facts of all is that near a great mass, time itself flows a little differently, more gently curved, more deeply gathered, as though the universe were laying a softer hand upon the passing of moments. And in this sleep story, that truth becomes not a puzzle to solve, but a cradle to rest in, a reminder that the cosmos can hold many rhythms at once, and that somewhere within those rhythms, there is always a slower one waiting for you. Perhaps now you can imagine the region around the sleeping black hole as a dark river of time, smooth and glass-like, with the stars drifting above it like candle reflections, each orbit tracing a quiet sentence in a language made only of patience. And if that image feels soothing, let it remain, because the mind does not need sharp detail tonight, only softness, only enough shape to lean into, only enough science to feel wonder without wakefulness. The hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has been carrying us here all along, through the local cloud around our sun, through the spacious lanes of the Orion Spur, through molecular nurseries and ancient halo clusters, and the warm inward fold of the galactic bulge. And now all those layers seem to rest behind us like the dimly remembered rooms of a vast sleeping house, while here, in the quiet near the center, the deepest room of all opens in silence and asks nothing of us except stillness. Even the light in this region feels older and softer, filtered through distance, dust, and time, arriving not as brightness, but as hush. And perhaps that is why this bedtime story can continue to help you fall asleep, because every fact here has been softened by scale, every idea wrapped in shadow, every image slowed until it nearly becomes a dream. And as your own thoughts grow wider apart, like stars spaced across a velvet field, you may notice that the black hole itself remains unseen, known only by the grace it creates in nearby things, by the curved devotion of the orbits around it, by the way the whole inner galaxy seems to lower its voice in its presence. And there is something deeply reassuring in that what is most powerful can also be most quiet, that what shapes the scene most profoundly may never need to glitter at all. Perhaps this is one of the secret gifts of a calming narration like this one, that it lets the universe become intimate without becoming sharp, lets immense structures feel sheltering rather than overwhelming, lets even a black hole seem less like an edge and more like a center of perfect rest, a silent well around which the galaxy has learned to move gracefully for ages beyond counting. Now, as this gentle bedtime story continues to unfold in its slow, luminous dark, you may imagine yourself floating beside those inner stars, not among them exactly, but near enough to feel their rhythm, near enough to sense the smooth river of time they travel through, and far enough that everything remains peaceful, softened, and safe, as though you were watching from a quiet balcony in the night, while far below a procession of candlelights moved through a sleeping courtyard. Nothing needs to happen here, and that may be the most soothing truth of all, because deep sleep does not ask for events, only permission, only gentleness, only a place where the mind can stop expecting change and begin to trust the slow continuity of darkness. So let this relaxing story hold you here a little longer, near the silent well at the galaxy's core, where gravity is velvet, where time is a hush-filled river, where where stars circle like lanterns in a sacred calm, and where every layer of the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has led not to intensity, but to profound peace, until the scene itself begins to blur. The orbits soften, the darkness deepens, and your own awareness, like a small drifting light carried on that slow black river, becomes quieter and quieter and quieter, dissolving gently into the deep and dreamless kindness of sleep. As this gentle bedtime story continues, let yourself drift farther into the softest part of the night, because now the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has brought us to a place where everything seems to move with extraordinary patience, where even the stars nearest the silent well of the galaxy appear less like objects and more like slow thoughts passing through a dream. And if you have been listening from the beginning of this sleep story, allowing its relaxing facts and calming narration to ease the edges of the day, then perhaps you can feel how natural it is to be here now, in this dim inner garden of orbits, where the dormant black hole rests at the center like a perfectly still pool, hidden inside a moonless courtyard. Nothing rushes here, nothing demands attention, and that may be one of the most soothing truths in all our nighttime story, that even in one of the galaxy's deepest regions, quiet can prevail for ages, with stars tracing patient ellipses around an unseen center, dust lingering in soft veils, and time itself seeming to gather into slower folds, like heavy fabric settling gently onto a polished floor. Imagine, if you like, that you are floating above this scene at a respectful distance, not close enough for anything to feel sharp or intense, only near enough to sense the elegance of its arrangement. The way gravity here has become almost architectural, shaping every path without a sound, guiding every star through its own calm route, as though the entire inner Milky Way were breathing in long and silent intervals. Perhaps the stars seem like amber lanterns carried around the edge of a dark fountain, each one suspended on an orbit so old and faithful that its motion has become a form of rest. And perhaps the black hole itself seems not like an interruption in the story, but like the deepest stillness within it, a central hush around which everything else has learned to move gracefully. This is one of the loveliest facts to rest with tonight. That structure in the universe is often hidden not because it is harsh, but because it is subtle, woven from relations rather than walls, from curved pathways rather than rigid lines. And here in the galaxy's core, that hidden order becomes almost tender, as though the stars are being held in an invisible cradle of spacetime and asked only to continue their slow circling again and again through ages too wide for ordinary thought. And as you listen, you do not need to picture every detail clearly, because a bedtime story for deep sleep does not ask the mind to stay bright, only to stay gently open, only to feel the softness of the idea, the quiet devotion of those orbits, the dark velvet between one lantern star and another, the way even light seems to lower its voice in this place. Around the resting core, the inner galaxy feels full, yet never crowded, rich, yet never noisy, because distance still exists even here. And distance, as we have learned throughout this relaxing story, is one of the cosmos's great kindnesses, giving every star room to move, every beam of light room to travel, every curve of gravity room to unfold without pressure, and perhaps your own thoughts can begin to imitate that spaciousness now, growing farther apart, less tangled, less eager to connect, until each one drifts alone for a moment in the dark before quietly fading. There may be faint clouds of material here, soft traces and lingering folds, but tonight they remain peaceful, part of the atmosphere rather than the action, because we are staying with the dormant mood of the story, with the sleeping center rather than any waking flare. And that choice itself is calming, a reminder that the universe contains many kinds of truth, including restful ones, including truths made of silence, balance, repetition, and long continuity. If you listen very softly inward, you may notice that the galaxy's heart now resembles your own approach to sleep, with the brighter motions of the day receding outward like distant spiral arms, the local concerns of waking life fading like old star clouds behind you, and only this deeper rhythm remaining, this inward hush, this slow ceremonial circling around a center that does not need to be named too loudly to be felt. And in that way, this nighttime story becomes less a journey through space than a journey into stillness itself, using stars and gravity and hidden cosmic structure as gentle companions, as lanterns placed along the path toward rest. So remain here a little longer in the dim garden of orbits, where the inner stars move like quiet watchkeepers, and the black hole sleeps in perfect composure beneath them, where time flows like dark silk over stone, where every scientific fact softens into atmosphere, and where the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood becomes a vast and sheltering pattern that asks nothing from you except surrender. And as that surrender deepens, the scene may begin to blur at the edges, the stars becoming softer, their paths less distinct, the dark center less an object than a feeling, a profound and gentle inwardness, until the whole galaxy seems to rock very slightly in silence. And you, listening from within this calming narration, can let your breathing become the only rhythm you follow, slow and steady, and almost dreamlike now, while the lanterns continue their patient turning. The silent well remains at rest, and the last bright fragments of thought dissolve one by one into the long, velvety quiet of sleep. As this gentle bedtime story continues, let yourself drift even more softly now, because the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has led us to a place where gravity itself begins to feel less like a force and more like a fabric folded with exquisite care. And in this sleep story, made to help you fall asleep with calming narration and a gentle bedtime hush, we do not approach that folded darkness with fear or urgency, but with the same slow trust with which one enters a dim room at night, knowing that silence is already there waiting, like a blanket laid open across a bed. All around us, the inner galaxy has grown quieter, not emptier, but more gathered, more inward. And one of the most relaxing facts of all is that the closer matter comes to a great stillness, the more its path reveals the shape of the space around it, as if the universe were sketching its own hidden geometry in lines of motion, too patient to be seen at once. And perhaps that is why this nighttime story can feel so soothing here, because we are no longer drifting through wide neighborhoods alone, but through through the soft evidence of curved reality itself, through orbits and arcs and subtle leanings that show how even darkness can create order without speaking. Imagine, if you like, that the dormant black hole ahead is not a hole at all in the ordinary sense, but a region where the velvet of space-time has been drawn inward into deeper and deeper pleats. A silent gathering of the cosmic fabric, and around those pleats, the nearby stars move like lanterns, carried along the hems of a great dark robe, each one gliding with such composure that even its speed feels restful from this distance, softened by scale, softened by time, softened by the hush that has wrapped our relaxing story from the very beginning. And as you listen, maybe your own thoughts begin to imitate those paths, no longer racing from one point to another, but curving gently, widening, slowing, settling into longer and quieter routes, until the mind itself becomes orbital, patient, spacious, content to return not to answers, but to stillness. There is something profoundly comforting in knowing that the universe does not always reveal itself through brightness, because here, near the resting center of the galaxy, so much is known by what it shapes rather than what it shines, by the way starlight bends around unseen arrangements, by the way motion lingers in elegant loops, by the way silence can seem deeper in one place than another. And this too becomes part of the bedtime story, a lesson whispered rather than taught, that some of the truest things in existence are felt through their gentleness and not their display. Now the region around us seems to glow only faintly, with old stars dimmed by dust and distance, and between them lies a darkness so smooth it feels almost warm, like the cool interior of a house that has held the day's last heat long after sunset. And in that warmth of imagined dark, the black hole remains dormant, inactive, resting in its own immense composure, not pulling us in suddenly, not disturbing the soft cadence of this sleep story, but simply existing as the deepest fold in the hidden structure we have been following all night. Perhaps this is one of the loveliest ways to think about cosmic structure before deep sleep, that everything has gradients, not cliffs, thresholds, not shocks, quiet transitions rather than sudden endings. And so even here, where gravity grows more pronounced in meaning, the journey stays smooth, the atmosphere stays tender, and the dark becomes more sheltering rather than more sharp. If you picture the stars nearest that central stillness now, you may see them as a small and faithful procession, each light tracing a path that has become almost ritual, almost ceremonial, moving not to arrive anywhere new, but to keep a long and beautiful relationship with the unseen center. And what a calming thing that is to rest with. That motion need not mean striving. That circling can itself be a kind of peace. That returning and returning and returning can be the very shape of rest. Your breathing may have found that rhythm already. A slow return, an easy repetition, a quiet orbit of inhale and exhale. And as this bedtime story continues to soften around you, those breaths may begin to feel like part of the galaxy's own lullaby, part of the same low music that carries stars around silent wells and lets time pool in deeper places without ever becoming heavy. We remain outside all harshness, outside all drama, suspended in a calm observational nearness, where the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood can be felt as pure relation, pure curvature, pure peaceful design. And from here, the dark no longer seems like absence at all, but like support, like the soft cloth against which every lantern star can be seen, like the great unspoken background that holds every visible thing in place. So let this relaxing story keep you here a little longer, near the quiet folds of gravity in the nearing dark, where the Milky Way has gathered itself inward, where space-time curves with velvet patience, where the dormant black hole sleeps at the center of an untroubled hush, and where every scientific fact has become so gentle, so slow, and so dreamlike that it barely feels like information anymore. Only atmosphere, only softness, only a final widening calm in which the mind can loosen its last bright knots, release its last attentive edges, and drift as the inner stars drift, in silence, in trust, in beautiful repetition, until the whole scene dims into one seamless field of darkness. And you, carried by this sleep story, sink another quiet layer down toward deep and dreamless rest. As this gentle bedtime story continues, let yourself drift even more quietly now, because the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has brought us to a place where almost everything has become soft enough to be felt rather than followed. And in this sleep story, made for deep rest and a calm descent toward sleep, the galaxy no longer seems like a distant arrangement of facts alone, but like a vast and velvety home whose innermost room is dark, still, and profoundly kind. Here, near the silent center we have been approaching for so long, the dormant black hole remains not a frightening absence, but a resting depth, a folded quietness in space-time around which stars continue their patient circling. And perhaps the loveliest thing to notice now is that even this close to the heart of the Milky Way, everything still moves with grace, with repetition, with a softness so complete that it feels like a lullaby written not in words, but in orbits. Imagine the stars nearest this central stillness as dim golden lanterns carried along invisible paths, each one returning and returning through the same long arcs, not because they are trapped in distress, but because gravity here has become a kind of tender guidance, a calm instruction whispered over ages, inviting each light to remain in relation, to lean gently into the unseen geometry beneath it. And as you listen, you may feel your own thoughts beginning to do the same, circling less anxiously, straying less sharply, following wider and quieter routes, until they no longer seem like separate thoughts at all, only soft movements through a dark and restful mind. The inner galaxy around you now feels layered like drapery in a sleeping palace, with dim dust hanging in folds, old starlight softened by distance, and silence resting beneath everything like a deep pool under moonless trees. And one of the most relaxing facts of all is that the universe does not need brightness to be beautiful, because here, in one of its most hidden places, the beauty comes from relation, from curvature, from the way unseen things shape visible ones without ever shouting for attention. This is why the dormant black hole at the center of our story has felt so peaceful all along, because it does not arrive with noise, it does not flash or call out, It simply deepens the stillness around it. And in doing so, it teaches the whole surrounding neighborhood a slower rhythm, a more measured hush, a gentler and more enduring pace. Perhaps you can sense now that the stars around this silent well are like the final wakeful thoughts before sleep. Still moving, still faintly luminous, but already softened, already less interested in destination than in rhythm. And if you let your breathing match them, slow and circular, easy and unforced, then your own body may begin to feel like part of the same hidden structure, part of the same quiet design, an inward curve of breath and rest held inside the greater curve of the galaxy itself. And this may be the most soothing truth of tonight's relaxing story, that even in a universe vast beyond comprehension, there are patterns gentle enough to cradle the mind, structures subtle enough to ease the nervous system, motions slow enough to invite surrender, and darkness deep enough to feel not empty, but wonderfully held. Around the quiet core, time seems less like a line and more like a still river, broad and black and smooth as polished stone in midnight rain. And the stars crossing that river do so without haste, each orbit a silver thread passing over dark water, each repetition a reassurance that the universe knows how to continue without strain, without panic, without ever losing its calm. And as this bedtime story moves toward an even softer fading, let yourself rest in that image, in the knowledge that the cosmos is full of these patient continuities, these returning paths, these low and tender ceremonies of motion, and that you do not need to understand every detail to be comforted by them tonight. The hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has carried us from the quiet boundary of the solar wind to the local clouds between stars, through the spacious lanes of our spiral arm across the old halo, and inward through the richer folds of the galactic heart. And now all those earlier rooms seem far behind us, dim and peaceful and nearly dreamlike, while this innermost chamber remains before us in perfect composure, its black center still sleeping, its surrounding lights still circling, its silence still deepening by almost imperceptible degrees. And because this is a nighttime story meant to help you fall asleep, we do not go any closer than peace allows. We do not disturb the hush. We only hover here in the restful outer nearness of that great stillness, and let its atmosphere become softer and softer around us, until the lantern stars blur, their paths dissolve, the dust folds into velvet, and the entire scene begins to feel less like astronomy and more like the inside of a dream. So remain here now in these last soft circles before the dreaming deep, where gravity is only gentleness, where darkness is only shelter, where the galaxy's heart beats in silence, too slow to hear, and where your final waking thoughts can drift away one by one like distant lights, disappearing behind layers of midnight mist, leaving you cradled by the calm architecture of the universe, carried by this sleep story into a deeper hush, a heavier stillness, and a tender, unbroken descent toward sleep. And now, as this gentle bedtime story continues into the deepest hush of the night, let yourself drift so softly that even the act of listening begins to feel optional, because the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has guided us to a place where everything seems ready to grow dimmer, quieter, slower, and more forgiving. And here, in the restful nearness of the galaxy's silent heart, the dormant black hole remains what it has always been in this relaxing story. Not a threat, not a rupture, not a thing of noise, but a sleeping depth around which the inner stars move with extraordinary patience, as though each one were a candle carried through the last corridor of a great dark house. And as you rest here, with the calm rhythm of your own breathing, perhaps you can feel how naturally the mind begins to loosen when surrounded by such steadiness, by such spacious repetition, by such a tender arrangement of darkness and light. The stars nearest this resting center seem softer now than before, less like points and more like glimmers seen through heavy eyelids, their orbits long and faithful, and so unhurried that motion itself becomes almost indistinguishable from stillness. And that may be one of the most comforting truths in all our nighttime story, that the universe does not always ask us to choose between movement and rest, because sometimes the deepest rest is simply a gentle kind of circling, a returning without strain, a continuation so calm that it feels like sleep already beginning. Around us, the inner folds of the Milky Way hang in dim layers. Old dust and ancient starlight gathered into a soft and shadowed chamber. And even the darkness seems textured here, as though velvet had been draped over invisible architecture, as though space-time itself had learned how to settle into pleats. And inside those pleats, the lantern stars continue their slow procession, never hurrying, never calling attention to themselves, only keeping their quiet relation to the unseen center with a grace that can soothe the mind almost without effort. If you imagine the galaxy now as a sleeping palace, then this region is one of its innermost rooms, a chamber where the lamps have all been turned low, where the corridors are lined with silence, where the deepest well lies still beneath polished stone, and where every sound that might once have existed has long ago faded into a hush too deep to disturb. And perhaps, as this sleep story carries you farther from the bright surfaces of thought, your own awareness can begin to mirror that chamber, growing less busy, less sharply lit, less interested in the exact edges of things, until every thought becomes only a faint orbit around rest, every memory only a small distant glow, every sensation only another layer of softness settling into place. One of the most relaxing facts about the universe is that its largest structures endure through rhythm, through balance, through patient repetition. And here, near the sleeping black hole at the Milky Way's quiet core, that truth feels especially close, because the hidden architecture surrounding us is not held together by force alone, but by continuity, by returning paths, by ancient motions that have found peace in their own persistence. And if you let that idea rest beside you for a moment, it may feel almost like permission. Permission not to solve, not to finish, not to hold on so tightly to the day, but simply to continue breathing in the dark, trusting that stillness can carry you farther than effort ever could. The nearer stars are dimming now in the imagination, not because they are gone, but because your mind no longer needs them in sharp focus. And beyond them, the black hole remains perfectly dormant, wrapped in the same profound composure that has defined it throughout this bedtime story. a central stillness so complete that everything nearby seems to lower its voice in reverence. And there is something deeply kind in that image, that even gravity can become gentle at the right distance. Even darkness can become shelter. Even the unknown can become a cradle when approached slowly enough. Perhaps now you can feel that the whole hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has been leading toward this soft dimming all along. From the quiet interstellar cloud around the sun to the broad lanes of the Orion Spur, from the sleeping nurseries of future stars to the halos, ancient lantern clusters, from the inner bulge of the galaxy to this final peaceful nearness. And all of it has unfolded not as a lesson to master, but as a slow descent into calm, a journey through layers of scale and silence, meant only to ease you farther into deep sleep. So remain here now in the gentle dimming of the inner sky, where the lantern stars blur into warm dust, where the folds of gravity become almost too soft to notice, where the galaxy's heart rests in its own perfect inwardness, and where your thoughts may begin to drift apart like the last few lights in a foggy harbor, each one fading without sadness, each one welcomed by the dark, until even the sense of floating through space becomes lighter and lighter and lighter. And the only thing that remains is the hush itself, the low cradle of the cosmos, the vast and velvet peace of a universe that has gone quiet enough at last for you to surrender completely, to sink below language, below images, below even wonder, and to be carried on the slowest of all currents into sleep as this gentle bedtime story continues into its quietest hour. Let yourself drift so deeply now that even the stars begin to feel like thoughts you no longer need to hold, because the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has carried us with extraordinary patience into the innermost hush of the galaxy. And here, in the restful nearness of the sleeping center, everything seems to have learned the art of softening. The lantern-like stars that once traced clear and elegant paths around the dormant black hole now appear dimmer and farther away, as though seen through layers of midnight silk, and their movement has become so calm, so measured, and so tender that it no longer feels like motion at all, but like the slow turning of a dream already beginning to close around you. Around us, the inner Milky Way rests in folded darkness, with old dust lying like velvet drapery between softened lights, and the great stillness at the center remains just as peaceful as before, not active, not sharp, not calling attention to itself, but simply existing as a deep and quiet well in space-time, a place where the universe has curved inward and chosen silence over spectacle. And perhaps that is the most soothing fact of all for this relaxing story, that even in one of the most mysterious places in the galaxy, the final feeling can be one of shelter, of structure, of being gently held inside something vast that does not need to speak loudly to be felt. If you imagine the black hole now, do not imagine edges or intensity, only a central hush beneath the hush, a folded inwardness so profound that the nearby stars seem to lower their glow in respect, circling at a distance, with a devotion so old and steady that their orbits feel like lullabies written in gravity. And as you breathe in and out, slowly and without effort, You may notice how naturally your own body begins to imitate that rhythm. The quiet return of breath, the soft repetition, the peaceful arc from fullness to release and back again. This is one of the hidden kindnesses of the cosmos. That repetition is everywhere, in orbit and tide, in day and night, in the turning of galaxies, and the rise and fall of a resting chest. And tonight, in this bedtime story meant to help you fall asleep, every one of those repetitions has been leading here, toward this final soft drift where nothing more needs to be learned, nothing more needs to happen, and nothing more needs to be carried, except the easy weight of your own drowsiness. The stars nearest the core now resemble faint amber embers at the far end of a long dark hall, each one glowing just enough to be comforting, just enough to remind you that even deep darkness can be companionable, and beyond them, the hidden architecture of the galaxy remains vast and serene, with the spiral arms far behind us, the old halo even farther, the interstellar clouds and neighboring suns, now feeling like distant rooms in a house you passed through long ago in a dream. And all of them together forming one immense and peaceful home, whose innermost chamber is this very stillness. Perhaps the universe feels gentler here because scale itself has become soft, because the distances are too large to press upon you, because time has stretched so wide that every worry from the waking day seems small enough to dissolve without effort. And in that softness, there is room for your thoughts to loosen one by one, to stop gathering themselves into sentences, to stop reaching outward, and instead to float quietly apart like dim particles of dust, settling through a last beam of evening light. Even gravity, in this final part of the nighttime story, no longer feels like drawing inward so much as cradling, as if space-time itself had become a great dark hammock suspended beneath the inner stars, holding every orbit, every veil of dust, every hush-filled interval in calm balance, and holding you too, in imagination, at a respectful and peaceful distance from the silent center, where you need not travel farther, need not see more clearly, need not stay awake to understand anything at all. The hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has done what gentle structures do. It has given the mind somewhere safe to wander, until wandering itself becomes unnecessary. And now the wandering may stop. Now the stars may blur. Now the folds of dust may become nothing more than softness upon softness. Now the black hole at the galaxy's core may cease to feel like an object entirely, and become instead a feeling of profound inward rest, a still point beneath the whole long story, a final quiet room with the lights turned low. So remain here for just a little longer in the final soft drift beneath the silent center, where every orbit has become a whisper, every scientific wonder has become a blanket, every distant light has thinned into a warm and fading glow, and every last wakeful thought may gently release its hold and sink away into the dark, until the Milky Way itself seems to recede into velvety calm. The lantern stars disappear one by one behind the heavy sweetness of sleep, and all that remains is the deepest hush of all, wide, dark, untroubled, and kind, carrying you farther down, farther in, and farther away from waking, until even this gentle bedtime story becomes too soft to follow, and you drift at last into deep and dreamless rest. And now, dear listener, as this gentle bedtime story reaches its final and softest chapter, let everything become a little dimmer, a little slower, a little farther away, because the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood has carried us from the quiet threshold of our solar home through the tender lanes between stars, through sleeping clouds, old halo lights, and the folded inward hush of the Milky Way's heart. And now there is nowhere left to travel, nowhere left to arrive, only this last calm drifting, this last restful nearness to the galaxy's silent center, where even the stars seem to understand that the story is ending not with a conclusion, but with a fading, not with a final statement, but with a long, gentle exhale into darkness. The dormant black hole remains where it has always been, still and peaceful, a quiet inward curve in the velvet fabric of space-time. And around it, the last lantern stars continue their slow and faithful circling. But their light is softer now, farther now, more like memory than sight, more like the last warm glow beneath closed eyelids than anything bright enough to keep you awake. And perhaps that is the loveliest truth this relaxing story can offer at the very end, that the universe, for all its scale and wonder, can become tender enough to sleep inside, spacious enough to rest inside, quiet enough to let every crowded thought dissolve without resistance. Imagine now that the galaxy itself is dimming with you, not disappearing, only lowering its voice, as though the spiral arms far behind us have wrapped themselves in midnight silk, as though the halo has drifted into dream, as though the old dust of the inner Milky Way has become nothing more than soft shadow laid gently over softer shadow. And here, in the final hush, you no longer need to picture every star or every orbit clearly, because the purpose of this nighttime story was never to hold the mind tightly, but to loosen it, to let science become atmosphere, to let facts become a cradle, to let the hidden architecture of the cosmos turn into a calm and sheltering darkness where you could at last stop carrying the day. The stars nearest the sleeping center now seem to move almost beyond movement, their long paths so patient that they have become part of the stillness itself. And as you breathe, slowly and easily, you may feel your own body entering that same rhythm, your chest rising and falling like one more gentle orbit in the great quiet order of things, your thoughts thinning out like distant starlight crossing too much velvet space, your awareness softening at the edges until it no longer reaches outward at all, but simply rests, warm and wordless, in the middle of the dark. There is nothing to fear here, nothing to follow, nothing to remember, because everything important in this sleep story has already done its work. The solar wind has faded, the interstellar clouds have opened, the spiral lanes have turned, the halo has watched, the inner stars have circled, and the silent well at the heart of the galaxy has remained exactly as it is now, perfectly calm, perfectly dormant, perfectly suited to this last soothing descent into deep sleep. Perhaps now, the hidden structure of our cosmic neighborhood feels less like astronomy and more like a home whose rooms have all gone quiet one by one. A hallway of stars with the lamps turned low, a great upper chamber of dust and time and distance, settling gently into stillness. And at the center of that home, not emptiness, but peace, not absence, but the deepest form of rest, a darkness so complete and so kind that every last bright fragment of thought can enter it without effort and simply soften out of view. If any image remains with you now, let it be a simple one. A few faint lanterns circling in the far distance, their glow amber and tender, their motion slow as breathing, their silence complete, while beneath them the black velvet center of the story sleeps without disturbance. And all around them, the galaxy holds its shape in quiet devotion, every orbit balanced, every layer folded inward, every unseen force becoming gentleness at the scale of dreams. And as this calming narration fades, you may let even that final image go. You may let the lanterns dim, let their paths disappear, let the folds of gravity become too soft to notice, let the Milky Way itself recede into a single, seamless hush. Because now the story has reached the place it was always leading you toward, the place beyond curiosity, beyond imagery, beyond the need to listen, the place where the mind becomes lighter than dust and slower than starlight and deeper than the dark river of time around the silent well. So rest now and drift now and sink now with no effort at all. As the last light fades from the quiet center of our cosmic neighborhood, as the final orbit dissolves into stillness, as the great sleeping structure of the universe folds around you like a cool and weightless blanket, and as every remaining thought loosens, softens, and slips away into the most peaceful darkness of all, where there are no more chapters, no more distances, no more stars to follow, only the hush, only the softness, only the deep and dreamless calm of sleep.